Okay, what's good, everyone? We are here, Agent Talk Podcast. Joshua Gray here. We are here with a very special guest today. Something I've been feeling on my heart as of late is to really get more into interviews. I do a lot of talking myself, but I want to be able to provide more of a space to hear what other people have to say about their journey, where they've been, things of that sort. And so we are here today with KAYLA Rogers. KAYLA, I'll kind of let her, I guess, introduce herself. But I guess we'll just start off. KAYLA, one, thank you for being here. For those that have no idea who you are, where you're from, can you give us, I guess, just a quick, like, who are you? Who is KAYLA Rogers?
Absolutely. So obviously, Kayla, I'm originally from New Hampshire, joined the military out of New Hampshire and spent the last 15 years in the Navy, traveling all over. I've lived North Carolina, I lived in Chicago, San Antonio, Florida, Seattle, California, you name it. My husband and I, Grayson, we moved here to Nashville about 4.5 years ago. I am a recent breast cancer survivor, and my husband is a country music singer, and I also run a law firm that's actually out of Florida, even though I'm in Tennessee. So, and I also manage my husband's career. So, a lot of different hats. I like to stay busy, but yeah, that's who I am.
So let's kind of unpack a little bit. So the Navy itself. We recently had Daniel Escobar on here, and he came and spoke, and he was an Army Ranger. And so he spoke on his experience, and it really opened my eyes because I guess I didn't realize how little I knew and know about just the military in general. Like, I had no idea. I thought if someone was in the military, they are overseas shooting. Like, I thought that's what everybody was. I didn't know that there are nurses and computer engineers and all the interworkings. Can you, I guess, just enlighten me and us on just your role within the Navy and what that experience has been like? I guess what brought you to that decision? Just, I guess, anything that you would want to share about that experience as a whole.
Yeah,
15 years,
absolutely.
like, I didn't know that. 15 years, that's a good amount of time.
I'm so close to retirement.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll start back on what caused me to join the military. So when I graduated high school, I was valedictorian or salutatorian, I can't remember, for high school. So I started off at University of New Hampshire and kind of got into the wrong crowd type of thing. And within my first semester, I dropped out and fell in love with a guy. He was in the Army, so we moved down to North Carolina and we got married. And it was just just everything was wrong about it. And it ended very badly. And so it ended to the point where I had to call my parents collect, let them know that I had gotten married because they didn't know that I was married. And that he had left me with absolutely nothing. And so they drove overnight from North Carolina or from New Hampshire to North Carolina to get me. And from that point forward, I promised myself that I would never be dependent on another person in life. And that, honestly, you talk about defining moments, and that was one of my defining moments. Even though it was a terrible situation, it really, God used that to pave me into who I am today. So no regrets there. Just a hard time. But so my parents got me back to New Hampshire, and after living out on your own, you just don't want to move back in with your parents. So literally like 3 or 4 days after I got there, I went and saw a recruiter, and I enlisted into the Navy. So that was March of 2005. And so I went in, so boot camp was in Great Lakes, and then my A school. So the way the Navy is set up is you have a rate, which is your job. And you are right. And the military has pretty much every job you have out in the civilian world, the military has it plus some. So for me, I'm what's called as a master at arms, which is basically military police. So I do harbor security, I do patrol on the streets of the bases, pretty much anything that a police officer would do in the civilian side, I do for the military. And then there's also a force protection side of that, anti-terrorism, that sort of thing. So that's my job. I graduated A school, which is basically the police academy. And my first duty station was Naval Station Everett in Seattle, Washington. And there I pretty much did both patrol on the base and harbor security. So harbor security is you drive the small boats that protect the big ships. So you basically sit out in the water with your weapons, just in case, you know, somebody comes within the perimeter and that sort of thing.
That is wild. I did not know any of that. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's like very, I don't know. I'm just kind of picturing, you said, you know, you out there on the boat with your weapons. I'm just like, the closest thing is crazy. When I was talking with Daniel, I told him the closest thing I could ever imagine is playing Call of Duty. But it's kind of like talking with you, like having this discussion and talking with him, and just the more I learn and read, like I read a book called A Night in Pesh Valley, and just seeing different experiences, the operation side seems very interesting to me. Like that's what, like the logistics and like I said, the approach to how certain things are done regarding like maybe security, what you just said, the little boat that guards the big boat, like that's like the intel part, the intellectual side of things is interesting to me. Okay, so for moving from there, so what's your role? I guess to recap, what is your role currently with the Navy? You might have just hinted on that, but just a refresher, like what are you currently doing with the Navy?
I'm now in the reserves. So I got off active duty in 2007 and went reserves. So it's the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year type of thing. I'm still a master at arms. So when you do your 2 weeks a year or you get deployed, you're still, you know, military police. That's your job. But in that, you also have rank. So I actually just got selected for Chief Petty Officer in the Navy, which is a really big milestone. For other branches, it's E7, and in the Navy, it is E7 for us too. But in the Navy, it's like a huge milestone where to become a chief is like, you're basically the enlisted officer almost. You're that liaison between like the commanding officer and the troops. So it's a really big leadership role. It's a huge honor. There's a lot of heritage behind it. So I was just selected last week. It just came out. So if all goes well during my training over the next couple of months, I will be pinned on as the Chief Petty Officer January 29th.
Well, first, congratulations. That sounds amazing. When you enlisted, did you have, like you said, it's been 15 years. Did you have this vision, like long term? I want to be what was the title one more time? I don't want to.
Petty Officer.
Chief Petty Officer.
Yeah.
Did you have a vision like that's what I want to become, or is that something you sought out, or how did you, I guess, get to this path?
So I guess when you first join the Navy, and the Chief Petty Officer is kind of like, those are your RDCs in boot camp. So those are the ones yelling at you and all of that. So they're a little bit intimidating until you start putting on a little bit of rank. But once you realize their job and how important their leadership role is, in the Navy, we have, pretty much there's a saying throughout the Navy that's, if you don't know the answer, go ask the chief. And the chief is, they are that subject matter expert. They are the one that won't steer you wrong. If they don't know the answer, they'll go out and get it for you. And so once you start gaining rank, you get a lot of respect, gain a lot of respect for the Chief Petty Officer. And I think I was probably around third class. So third class petty officer, that's an E4. Once I was about that rank, I was like, I want to be a chief. And so I have worked my whole career on this. It took me 4 years to get it. I've put in for it for 4 years, and finally this year was my year.
Awesome. Well, congratulations again to you on that. Yeah, that's big time. That's what's up. Okay, so steering from that, let's talk about, let's see what will be next touching point. So law. Can you give a background? There's so many different extensions. Can you give me just a background for those again that have not heard of you, where you come from in that field, how you got into law, what you do? I guess I don't want to, yeah, whatever you got to paint that picture, I suppose.
So I'm in a unique position because my law firm is in Florida, and I live in Tennessee. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit, here. But basically, I went to my undergrad was in legal studies, bachelor's in legal studies out of South University, and then I went on to Nova Southeastern for law school. From there, I had been in a really bad accident back in 2010, and I got to experience how the insurance companies really jerk you around when you're actually injured, and you deserve payment for your medical bills and that sort of thing. I had over $1 million in medical bills, 5 back surgeries, and they didn't want to pay me more than $20,000. And so it really just kind of lit a fire under me. And I was like, you know what, from this point forward, I will be an advocate for these people because this is not right. And so I do personal injury law. I work for a personal injury firm called Viles and Beckman out of Florida. I worked there for, I want to say 2 years before we moved to Nashville. And I have the most incredible boss. He is such a blessing. And so I didn't want to leave him and he didn't want me to leave. So we transitioned me into kind of like the CEO role. So it's like firm administrator when I moved up here. So I work remotely, fly down occasionally, and I run the whole firm. So I am in charge of all of our staff, all of, everything, operations, marketing, everything from day-to-day client relations, everything I handle.
What is the name again of that firm?
Viles and Beckman.
Viles and Backman. That's very interesting. That's crazy. $20,000 for what? Was it just a situation? Like, how does that work for them? Because I mean, typically I'm thinking like I'm just an average citizen, is you pay your payments, you have, the premium, and then you have your coverage. How are there ways around that for them? Like, how does that work?
So obviously the insurance company wants to pay as less as, or as, the least amount as possible. And our job is to get you the most amount possible. If you have coverage, so say the person hits you and they're at fault and they have, I don't know, let's say $100,000 worth of insurance, you would go after their insurance first. And if your case, valued over 100,000, then we would demand what's called as the policy limits tender. So we would, demand that they tender their limits. If they don't, you continue to negotiate or you file suit, that sort of thing. And then if your case is worth, say, 500,000, and we get that 100,000, if you have uninsured motorist coverage, then we can go after that on your policy. So it's a little complicated, but so in my case, the person that hit me had 300,000 in coverage. The insurance company did not want to pay me more than 20,000. We litigated the case for about 3 years, and they ended up paying me over the policy limits because we had them in bad faith. So, and that's a whole nother ball game to talk about. But yeah, it lit a fire in me because it wasn't like I was, getting a little tiny fender bender and was like, oh, my neck and my back, and it didn't really hurt. Like, here I was 23 years old going through 5 back surgeries and had my military career on the line because I couldn't do anything for them. I was in jeopardy of losing my retirement, all sorts of stuff. And they were trying to fight back and say, no, it's only worth 20,000. So at that point I was like, no, I'm going to be an advocate for, as many people as possible that are legitimately hurt.
How often does that happen? How often does a case like that happen where the real injuries are this amount, but an insurance company, doesn't or is, fighting against? Because 3 years too, like that's a long time, I'm sure. So that's basically saying really throughout the rehab as well, you're still having to fight this case, and not, if not longer. How often does something like that occur?
All the time. That's that. If it didn't, then there wouldn't be personal injury attorneys, because then the insurance company would just cut you a check and you wouldn't have to fight them on it. So it's pretty much every case. I mean, you have to fight them on every case.
Okay, so building off of that though, now one thing I am gathering from you, I kind of knew this before. So for those a little background, and we'll talk about Grayson in a little bit, but Kayla and I, so we obviously both live in Nashville, go to the same church, the Hills, done some stuff with her husband, same men's Bible study group, all of the things, just same community essentially. But we've built some sort of background before. However, one thing I'm building for sure is you seem like once you're kind of determined on like you have this goal, you gone. Like once the mind, it seems at least from what I shake your head, like you obviously agree. It seems like you kind of have this mindset. Once I set this goal, I'm on it.
Yeah.
Has it always been? I mean, one, am I correct? And if two, if I am, then has it always been that way for you, or where does that mentality come from? Because to be in one, I mean, we haven't gotten even into all the whole picture yet. To be in Navy, to be in a chief, and then to be running a CEO law firm, doing what you're doing over there. When did that mindset come about? Like, yo, I can do whatever I set my mind to.
I think it's always been kind of ingrained in me, to be honest with you. I mean, literally, my parents told me when I was little, I actually put it in my mind that if I didn't get all A's, I would get in trouble. And they never told me that. They said they never had anything where, I was going to get grounded if I got below an A, but I just I set that limit, and I've never had below an A in my entire life. And so, and I'm talking from like third grade on, because I don't think you have A's and B's below that. But yeah, I've never had below an A, and it was just set by me. And every time that I set a goal, it's just, I hate failure. And so, I'm all about goals. I'm very goal oriented. I set goals throughout my law firm daily. And it's not like they're, easy goals to hit. I always sit down with my staff and let them know, hey, I'm setting this goal. And they usually kind of take a deep breath, And I'm like, but I'm setting it because it's a stretch, but you can do it, and I'm going to help you do it. And so, after we start setting them and they start reaching them, it's addicting. When you start hitting your goals, it's addicting. But the part of it is setting reachable goals, and not just setting the long-term goal of, I'll use my husband for an example. If his only goal was to get signed and to make it, quote unquote, then he would constantly feel like a failure, because he's never hitting any milestones. So you have to hit smaller goals to get to your big goal. And then that continues to motivate you and recharge you to get, to your end goal.
Okay, so 100% agree. It's interesting you brought up the A's. So I don't know if I made this up. Maybe I did, but I believe same mindset was I have to get all A's. Like I had to get all A's. When I was in elementary school, for instance, I was awarded when I graduated from fifth grade. I was awarded. It was me and this girl named Brittany Bradshaw. We were awarded some sort of award for we had not missed a day of school from kindergarten to fifth grade. And that was like the whole school, basically. It was Clark Elementary. So that was ingrained. And for sure, I think it transfers. That's something I'm definitely realizing is, like you said, you mentioned your parents. That's something that whether you made it up or not, that was a belief system that you had. And it's clearly had, positive benefits as time has progressed. So now you mentioned your husband. Can we get, a background of Grayson and just how you guys met? You mentioned, you work with him in regards to his music and being an artist. And can you, give us just a few thoughts or just an open discussion on your role with Grayson, how y'all met, just all of the things?
Yeah. So it's actually funny. We met because he hired me to manage him. And so back in the day, back when I lived in Florida, I had some friends that were in a band, and I think it was like the night before Thanksgiving or the night after Thanksgiving. And I went to one of their shows, and I got to the end of the night, and the manager came up to them while I was sitting there, and he was like, "I'm sorry, we didn't make enough money tonight, so we're not going to pay you." And if you're developing a theme, like I'm a big advocate for people. So I stood up and I was like, you guys didn't have a contract? What do you mean? And I said, can I handle this for you? So I went and talked to the manager, and I came back and I said, here's your pay. And by the way, now they paid your par tab too, but for just having to go through that. And so from that point forward, I kind of developed a little bit of a hobby of managing bands and artists and that sort of thing. It was just kind of fun to me. And, I got to go to the concerts and that sort of thing. And we did really, really well. My first artist had a lot of success. And so their rival, so to speak, was Grace and Rogers. And so when I left my first artist, I reached out to Grayson and said, hey, I'm looking for another artist. I'd love to sit down with you. And so we did, and he hired me. And through that process, just through working together, we became best friends. And then we fell in love shortly after that. So, and the rest is history. We've been together 6 years and married for 3.
So just a little background. So even before Grayson, what is it like managing, or even backdrop? Like when did you start? So far we've got a few extensions here. Okay. So we have, for those on the podcast, I'm using my hands here. So check us out on the YouTube if you want the visual. But you have Navy here, your progress with the Navy. You have the law firm, and now we have Grayson. Where do the 3 fall in line at the point that right now, like you mentioned, where the rival, you find out that the rival is Grayson? Like, how do the 3, where are we right now in the timeline?
As far as what, so.
Like when you met Grayson, where were you in your Navy career as well as with the law firm?
When I met Grayson, Navy career, I believe I was a first class petty officer in the reserves. So it's pretty much where I was before I got selected for chief a couple of weeks ago. So same rank, master at arms in the reserves out of West Palm Beach, Florida. Legal wise, I was working for a different firm. We were doing securities litigation. And that was out of West Palm Beach, Florida. And that's a lot of, like stocks, bonds, CDs, that sort of stuff, a lot of retirement plans, working with, a lot of big stockbrokers, that sort of thing. And then honestly, the managing the artist thing was just kind of a side gig for me. It was just a hobby and something to, do on the side type of thing.
Okay. And so you meet Grayson. So y'all, just for clarification, you started out, it was business first. Like it was the relationship managing him. And through that management, you guys obviously built this friendship and then now marriage. What is it about Grayson? Because so basically, I guess to paint the picture, I think right now we're recording this. What's the date on this? It's October 29th. I think this is going to come out probably sometime October. I think November. In November, we're going to get a stream of getting some interviews out. Grayson's as well. So for those that are listening, Grayson will also get his interview out during this timeline. But what is it about Grayson himself that was like, I want to marry this guy? Because I know Grayson. Grayson, yeah, good, really good dude, solid, very low key. What is it about Grayson that was like, I like this guy here?
He was, so at this point, when I first met him, I did not know the Lord. I was not a Christian. I wasn't, raised around faith or anything like that. And there was just something so different about him. Like I couldn't pinpoint it. It was just, he just had a light about him and I loved it. It was just like kept drawing me in. And he was so easy to talk to. I remember we would sit in parking lots of restaurants until like 3 and 4 in the morning and just talking about life, just opening up about our struggles in life. And he literally became my best friend. I mean, there wasn't a day that that didn't go by that we didn't talk. And he really is like, he's got the biggest heart ever. He was so different as to most of the guys that I had dated in my lifetime. in that he just really did have just a love for people and a love for God. And I mean, every day he never pushed his faith on me, which I always respected because I was very standoffish about it. But I would always see him posting about like his Bible study and what God was teaching him that day. And finally, I started asking him questions about it. And I was like, what do you mean by this? And, and I told him, how nervous I was about even diving into faith and learning about God. And he was like, I can't promise that I'll ever or have all the answers, but I'll try to get them for you. And so I would ask him questions, and he would send me links to like gutquestions.org and that sort of thing. And then one day, it was October, I want to say 12th, I think it was October 12th. I finally gave myself to the Lord, and he was the first person that I called. I was just like, I just, gave my heart to the Lord, and he cried with me and celebrated with me. And we just had that special bond ever since.
That's awesome. Okay, so now I was thinking of when would be the best time to bring up this verse that's in the background. I'm going to read it. It says, I believe, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Colossians 3:23. Is that a verse that you put up? Is that a go-to verse for you?
It is. This is my office, so all of my work goes down in my office. And I struggled for a very long time on idolizing my work and my accomplishments. If anybody is familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3, so I'm like strive on my accomplishments and that sort of thing. And so a couple of years ago, the Lord convicted me that I was idolizing work and accomplishments. And right before we got married, I went into like 6 months of just really asking the Lord to search my heart and to teach me what he wanted me to learn about being a wife before we got married. And the biggest thing that he told me was that he wanted me to have a work-life balance. And so when we moved into this house, I put that up, and that's my daily reminder, because I'm on Zoom meetings all the time and that sort of thing. And I see it, and that's my reminder that I work, everything that I do is for him and not for man. And it's my reminder to, a lot of the times I'll look at it and be like, okay, it's 6:30. I'm logging off and going to spend time with my husband now, instead of working until 9 o'clock at night, which I used to do. So.
I love that. And I love that because I think that's so timely. That's a discussion, and even so many depths to it, so much depth to it. I love that with you being a woman, is that that's something you can speak to as well, because I know for sure that that is an issue for men. Like that's a common, like in our group, like, oh, work, like it's very easy for, I think, any individual, whenever you have your own ventures and your own endeavors and things that you're, like you said, want to be an advocate for a variety of things for good intentions as well. What is it about, the pursuit of, excellence or success or whatever it might be? Why is that with work? Because the same thing for me. Someone, I have a few businesses, the podcast, things of that nature. Why is it that that can be something that is hard maybe to turn off for us, would you say?
I think it gets addicting. You like I was talking about earlier, the little goals
That's
and
a
like
good word right there. Yeah.
Hitting those little goals gives you that little shot of dopamine. It's just kind of like social media and getting those likes and that sort of thing. It just, those little accomplishments, they just continue to get you going. And you're like, oh, if I do this, then I can get to the next one. And I really do. I think that it's, work is good. God says work is good. He even called his work good, but he also took, a rest day. And I think that a lot of the times in this day and age, culture is teaching us to just continue to work, work, work. And I know for America, we basically live to work versus, working to live. And so I think it's really important to just take that step back and realize, like, even God rested, we need to rest. And when you finally do that and you set those boundaries, it's so much more healthier and you're so much more happier. And it's just hard to make that decision and do the transition. But
Okay. So God himself, okay, we bring God. And one, I do think that's so timely. Actually, that to me, that's a big thing that I've realized for sure. 2020 is that God rested, and the reality that He rested, as you read just right off in Genesis, and the fact that if God rested, it really is good for us to do the same.
Yeah.
Just in general, like to me, the concept of sleep, like I love like to sleep. I really do. Like I'm not lazy. Like I get up 4 a.m. every day, but I love when I'm asleep. I just love that the concept that we can rest and then gain energy. To me, that's amazing. It really is just that whole process. Okay, so for you, if someone, let's say someone just randomly comes up to you, they've never heard of God before, never heard of his name, have no idea the Lord, like who is that? What's that? Who is God to you?
Oh goodness. That's a good question. God is, he's so much, I mean, he's my everything. And a lot of the times when people ask me about God, I talk about what he's done in my life because I know as a prior non-believer, that was what was most moving to me. When I heard those God stories and I was like, wow, like that really is a miracle. And so then you can kind of see what God's doing in your life. God is my everything. He has been my healer. By the grace of God, I have no more cancer in my body right now. And he is a miracle worker. And I'll attest to that on many different ways. He is my protector. I mean, it's so crazy to see what he has done in my life recently. Like a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I know we'll talk about that. But for 3 years before that, I went up for chief petty officer, right? And I didn't get it each year. And I was so disappointed, but I was like, okay, Lord, not your time. I trust you. Like if it's your will, you'll make it happen in your due time. Last year I got diagnosed with cancer. I went into my chief's petty officer exam in between chemo rounds, sick as a dog, throwing up. I had chemo brain, all sorts of stuff. I took my chief petty officer exam, and when I tell you I could not remember anything in that exam, I couldn't. Like I prayed my way through that test, and I got home and I told my husband, like, if I make it, it's a miracle this year, because I couldn't think. And then I've been praying really, really hard for Grayson's career because he's just so faithful, and he deserves it so much. And I feel truly that God has put on my heart that his music career is going to happen in his timing. And it's all come 360. Like I just made chief petty officer. And he just released a song for my breast cancer journey, Fighters. When I found out about the chief petty officer, he posted a post about, me taking the exam and, during chemo and that sort of thing. And the MCPON, which is like the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, like the whole Navy, he's the guy.
What's the name again?
We call him MCPON, but it's Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. So he's like the Master Chief of the Navy. He shared Grayson's story, and it has since gone viral. As of yesterday morning, 3.6 million people have viewed his post, and it's bringing to light his music, Fighters, that music video. We're getting reached out for, articles and interviews and all sorts of stuff. And it's just, yesterday I was driving and I was like, Lord, like now I know why you didn't allow me to make chief the last 3 years. Like you waited for such a time as this to make it all happen, to use my cancer journey, to use my Navy, to, help his career. And it's just crazy to see God's hand in it all, and when it all comes together.
So true.
I didn't really answer your question, but
no, that was much better than whatever I was looking for. Because it's beautiful, because it really is to see, and that's one thing that I think God has impressed on me is that there will always be fruit when you stay obedient to him and when you follow him and when you seek him. And so that's amazing for one, but also not surprising. That's one thing it's so interesting because I remember when it was one of the first Bible studies that Grayson came to. It was at my house, and we go through our prayer. What are we grateful for and what are we praying for? This was maybe 2019, beginning of 2019, maybe I want to say. And I know for him, it was music career and for provision, for growth, fruit, for all the effort that he has put in. So to see that, I think that it is amazing. It really is because God does want us to seek him out, and when he does that, he blesses us. So very grateful, and that's awesome to hear for you as well, just with everything. uh
Yeah, it's
going
awesome.
so going back, so we are recording this in October, so it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. For you, can you go bring us through your journey with cancer, and just whatever you're willing to share, like what was it like to hear whatever words that you heard? I guess whatever you're open to, I guess, going through, would you mind taking us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually started February 2019. I felt a lump in my breast, and I guess as a young woman, you always hear about, lumps in your breast and breast cancer and that sort of thing, but you don't really know, what it actually would feel like and that sort of thing. And so you kind of second guess yourself. But I think it was April, I went in for my just annual physical, and I let my primary care doctor know, like, hey, I think I have a lump in my breast. And that doctor at the time he felt it, and he was like, yeah, and he's like, but you're really young, and he's like, it's not abnormal to just for young women to have cysts in their breasts and that sort of thing. If it's not painful, I'm not worried about it. And I didn't know any better, so I just kind of went on with my journey. And a couple months later, I felt it getting bigger. And at that time, Grayson was like, I think you need to get a second opinion. And I kind of felt the same way. So I went in and asked for a different doctor. And she was like, I agree, it could be nothing, but it could be something. Let's just go ahead and get you, some tests just to make sure. And so we did an ultrasound that came back abnormal, did a mammogram that came back abnormal, and then they sent me for a biopsy. The biopsy took literally 10 business days to come back, and it felt like a year. And the Sunday before I got the news, I was sitting in church, and Pastor John at the Hills, he preached a message on sometimes God brings you through the wilderness so miracles can come out of the wilderness. And at that moment, I knew in my spirit that it was going to be cancer. I looked over at Grayson and I said, it's going to be cancer and it's going to be okay. And he kind of thought I was being negative, and he's like, no, you got to be positive, babe. And I said, no, like, it's going to be cancer and it's going to be okay. And sure enough, that Wednesday we got the news. I was sitting right here when I got the call. I was working, and Grayson, I think, was in a songwrite across town. And so the nurse calls and she says, Dr. So-and-so would like to see you right away. And at that point, I knew, if it's good news, the doctor is going to get on the phone and tell you. If they want to see you face to face, then you pretty much know that it's going to be bad news. So I remember going downstairs and getting in the shower, and I was just sobbing. And I just said, God, if this is what you need me to go through, I trust you. And all I could get out, I sat in the shower for probably 15 minutes, just sobbing, just saying, I trust you, Lord. I trust you, Lord. I trust you, Lord. That's all I could say. The rest of the day was pretty numb. We went to the doctors. They told me that it was cancer. And then they said, the next step is seeing a surgeon, but the earliest they can see you is in about 3 weeks. But don't Google anything, because Google will tell you that you're dying. So you literally just told me that I have cancer.
So they told you that about Google?
Yeah. Yeah. So you literally just told me that I have cancer, that the next step is to see a doctor in 3 weeks, and you told me not to Google. So you go into like fight or flight mode. And so immediately, you have this cancer in your body and you're feeling like, I need to go in for surgery, like I need to start treatment. And the whole beginning of the process is like, for me, was like a 3-month waiting game. So you wait 3 weeks to see the doctor, and then you have to get more tests, and you have to wait for those tests to come back, and then you have to wait for more tests, and then finally they come up with a treatment plan, and then you have to wait for surgery date. And so I got diagnosed on October 10th, 2019. My treatment actually started December 17th, 2019. So it was like 2 months of just full blown up waiting.
What
That was
is your, not to cut you off, but what's your mind like at that point? Because that, I mean, that is something that creates fear for people. Like that is, I can only imagine. I
yeah.
really, and like, what is your mindset? I guess take us through maybe that first day, but also when did it get to the point for you where you were like, okay, because I would assume from everything you've said so far, there came a point where you were like, all right, like it's on, like we're ready to go. Like when did that, was it like that from the get-go in the shower, or when did that process happen for you, if you did get to that point?
Yeah. So the first day, like I said, I was pretty numb. I actually left the doctor's office and I decided I'm numb right now. I'm going to make all of my calls and notifications now, so that I don't have to keep reliving it and telling each and every person. So I did the whole shebang. I called both of our families. I called my sisters. I called parents, everything. I even did my social media post. I said, well, it's cancer. Give me a couple days to process and I'll be back. And so that day I did all of my notifications and then allowed myself like the next 2 days to kind of process. It's the waiting period is the hardest part, because you don't know, like you hear cancer and you think, am I going to die? And then so I started doing research. I got in contact with the American Cancer Society and they gave me like factual information that wasn't from Google. And I started realizing breast cancer diagnosis is not a death sentence. Actually, if you get it, early on, it's actually a 99% success rate. So
Is it really, huh?
it is. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. I just even just what you said, because immediately my thought when you had said death sentence, my thought with is there is a tie with cancer equals death.
Mm-hmm.
There is a
Yeah.
mental belief system that is true.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what, I guess, was there anything going through the process? Was there anything that you think, I mean, hey, like if there's women listening to this, like I'm thinking, like, man, I really hope Lid listens to this episode. Is there
Yeah.
anything going through this process that you would want if you could give out a message to women, to men, to whatever, in regards to the entire process, or if there's a specific message you would want to speak on, what would that be that you would want people to know?
So first, there's a couple of different messages. In the beginning stage, I would say know your body and be an advocate for your body. I have, throughout my journey, I have met so many survivors, a lot of them my age, so in their 20s, 30s, that actually had to go to 2 or 3 different doctors before they would get sent for a mammogram. Same situation as me, because we're told like, oh, you're young, this is normal, but in actuality it was cancer. So for women, or even men, because men can get breast cancer too, know your body, do your self checks. The only way that you're going to know if something is off is if you do your self checks regularly, because at that point what everything feels like. So if something develops, then it's going to feel off to you, versus
Self
wondering.
check.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we're on the YouTube here. So if you're not watching this on the YouTube, we are on the YouTube. So for me, like, what is a self check? Does that just mean feeling out your chest area in general, or like is it that
Yeah,
simple? Or what is that process like?
yeah. So you can actually Google it, like how to do a breast cancer self check. But it does everything from like your armpits, because this is where your lymph nodes are. That's where the cancer would spread first. So checking your lymph nodes, checking your actual, your chest area, that sort of thing. And just feeling, if you do it regularly, every 2 weeks, at least once a month, you're going to feel if something's off. Like if you all of a sudden have a mass that has never been there before, it's time to get something checked out.
Okay, so going back, everyone, if you're listening, definitely get checked out. You have encouraged me already to do that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we go back to, so you let everyone know, you did your Instagram post, you put out to her like, this is what's going on.
Mhm.
What was next for you throughout this process? You don't have to get too detailed, but was there any major milestone or benchmark? Was there a point where mentally you hit a shift? Like, is there anything that you would want to touch on throughout the process
Yeah.
to get to where you are now?
So I kind of at the very beginning just kind of decided, okay, God needs me to go through this. I felt, I won't say who, but I felt like he needed me to go through the process so that certain people could come to the Lord, and they needed to see him work through me. And so I just decided that that's my why. And so, going through anything, I need a why. Why am I doing this? And that's my driving, motivating factor. And so it's like, okay, Lord, use me. You have me here, use me. And so um, I had my first surgery, which was a double mastectomy, on my birthday of all days. So that's where if somebody doesn't know, that's where they remove both of your breasts. And they put in what's called as tissue expanders. So they remove all of the tissue in your chest, and they put in, best way to describe them is kind of like balloons. And so each week after my surgery, I would go into my plastic surgeon and he would pump it up with saline, to like stretch that skin to basically create a new breast pocket where implants could eventually go. That surgery was tough. I had to sleep in a recliner for about 6 weeks. You have pterodactyl arms, so you can't raise your arms anything more than, for those of you that can't see, it's basically
I was about to say, yeah, okay, I
you
got
have
you.
to keep, basically imagine keeping your elbows tucked into the sides and just moving your arms up and down. That's all that you can do for about 3 weeks. You can't lift anything. You can't push off of your arms. So you literally, I had to sleep in a recliner because you have no abdomen muscles at that point because you just went through surgery. So it was tough. But I wish I had pictures to show you, because literally the night I was still at the hospital, the night after surgery, I was up walking around on the hospital room floor because I was like, no, I read that the more active you are, the quicker you heal. And it was true. I was back in the gym 2.5 weeks later, and usually it's an 8-week recovery time. So
That's amazing. Okay, so I didn't know any of that. That is very insightful. I had no idea about any of that. Uh, so for you now, so you've gone through the process. Now you went through chemotherapy. Am I correct?
yeah, started chemo in January. Did chemo January to April, and then chemo ended in April.
What is chemotherapy? Because that's another word too. I mean, just for me, just thinking like that's another word too that there can be some fear attached to it. What is chemotherapy like? Because you hear certain things, but I have no idea. Like, what is that process like?
So for women, or for women, the word chemotherapy, for some reason we attach to, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my hair. It's amazing how much identity we hold in our hair. So that was my first thought was, I remember originally they told me that they didn't think I was going to need chemo. And so I was really, really happy about that. And then you have an oncotype score, which basically tells them the rate of reoccurrence that you have, like the risk of the cancer coming back. And it's on a scale of 0 to 100. And if it comes back 0 to 25, you don't need chemo. I scored a 26. So, so I was literally right on the cusp, and I was so mad at God. I remember just screaming out to him in my closet one day, just so mad at him. And at that time, Pastor Kristen from the Hills called me at that exact moment, and she said, let me pray with you. And so she prayed with me, and she said, it's okay for you to be mad at God. Like, he can take that. tell him how you feel, but don't allow yourself to stay there. After you're done, get up and move on. And that was the best advice she could have given me. And so I told God how I felt that day. And the next day I was just like, okay, I'm going to lose my hair. I'm going through chemo. And then at that moment, I said, you know what? I am not going to allow cancer to dictate how and when I lose my hair. I'm going to choose that. And so we made the decision to have a head shaving party. And Grayson and I shaved our heads side by side with all of our friends around. It was actually on a Sunday after church. John Allen salons actually opened up their salon to us, gave us makeup artists and hairstylists and everything, just totally donated. And we made a really, really special day out of it. So
That's amazing. Okay.
yeah.
One, yes, Kristen, very timely, very timely. We just had to turn in pastor appreciation videos. And that's the exact same thing I said is both of them have always had a timely word for sure. Okay. Last few questions. So now one, you are now cancer free, correct?
Yeah.
Or how would you determine or where is everything right now, I guess?
So they actually got all of the cancer in my surgery. So my birthday is actually my cancer-free day, which is cool. The chemo was actually to just lower my rate of reoccurrence. So hopefully it won't come back. I am at the point now. So normally you would, I had hormonal cancer. So there's a lot of different types of breast cancer. Mine was driven off of estrogen and progesterone. A lot of that is found in foods, cheeses, dairy, meats, that sort of thing. That's why it's becoming more and more common in our culture for hormonal cancer. So usually in my case, they would put me on a drug called tamoxifen, and I would have to be on that for 10 years. And that is basically like a hormone blocker. I prayed my way through my journey. So I prayed about my surgery and he gave me a peace about it. Prayed about chemo, he gave me a peace about it. No matter which way I prayed, I did not have a peace about tamoxifen. So I actually refused the drug, and I live every day waking up and praying that God has dominion over declaring that God has dominion over my body, and that if he needs me to go through this cancer journey again, then I trust him, but I'm praying that he does it.
It's always just good, refreshing, because it's not the first time, obviously, we've had a conversation, but the conviction behind your faith really is admirable because it's so, I think it's easy for a lot of people to be like, yeah, I believe, but do we have faith? And that's, definitely admirable. I will keep you, prayed up for sure. One thing I want to touch on again, like I said, last few questions, Grayson, just a little bit to go back. So now he's obviously had a big role in, your journey and this, everything going on. You're obviously, your husband, y'all work together on the media side and with him with being an artist and his journey. He's released Fighters. Shout out. We'll plug again. So Fighters available where? Spotify, on Apple Music, all the things, but go listen on Spotify, right? That's
Yeah, and the music video actually has footage from our head shaving party, and that's on YouTube and Vivo. So
available on YouTube. Check him out. Grayson Rogers. His Instagram is at Grayson Rogers Music. Yep. I want to say we will get your plug in before we finish this episode as well. But just a real quick, Grayson himself, or we won't say that, a good husband. This is a question I asked Daniel as well. Can you finish this sentence? A good husband is what? Because it seems like you have a good husband.
I have an amazing husband. I wouldn't have been able to get through this journey without him. A good husband to me is my best friend, my companion. He literally, I can talk to him about anything. And going through such a hard time like cancer, when a lot of the times there are no words that we want to hear, a lot of the times people try to tell you what they think that you want to hear, but he knew that there were no words. And so he would just be there for me when I wanted to cry, be there to just hug me when I felt alone. One of the favorite things that he did for me through my journey was I was struggling a lot with self-image, with having my breast removed. And before my surgery, he contacted all of our friends and family and collected affirmations about or from them about me as to why they love me or what they think about me. And it was like every time that I was struggling with a self-image or anything, like he would have me pick one out of the email or pick one out of the jar and read it. And it was just a reminder that people love me for me and not physical image. And it was just so powerful and so helpful. And he's just an incredible husband.
I love it. Shout out Grayson.
Yeah.
Good dude. Yeah, for sure. That's amazing there. Okay, so the flip. A good wife is what?
A good wife is an encourager. I feel like husbands have so much pressure on them to be the man of the household and to provide and to do, to be a good father when you're a father and just to provide that, that man of the house role. And I feel like a good wife comes alongside them and helps them and supports them and encourages them, especially in this day and age when, it's not all the time that you see a husband coming, into the household and doing that. And so I think a wife truly comes alongside them and supports them and encourages them.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever it might be, what are you doing? Where are you? What is the long-term vision for KAYLA Rogers?
I would love to have a family. That was a really hard part of the cancer journey as we were trying to get pregnant before the cancer journey. But I would love to have a family, have children. I would love, love, love to see my husband successful in his music career. And just really wherever God wants to take us. I mean, I'm happy. I just want to continue to see where he's going to take us in life.
Love it. Okay, before our last question, so we mentioned Grayson, so it's at Grayson Rogers Music. So plug on there, listen to him, YouTube Fighters. Where can people connect with you?
I am Mrs. Grayson Rogers on Instagram. I am KAYLA Rogers on Facebook. Those are the two major ones. I'm not all over socials like him, but those are my two major ones.
Okay, so in the Instagram is MRS Grayson Rogers. Okay, so this is the Agent Talk podcast. Joshua Gray here. Before our last question, we will plug. Ask if you're listening to this on the audio, please give us a 5-star review. That would be greatly appreciated. If you think this is 5-star content, if you think KAYLA gave some 5-star wisdom, which I think she did for sure. If you're listening to this on the YouTube, a subscription or a thumbs up would be great. KAYLA, last question for you is your last thing that you get to write down. You get to write down on a piece of paper, you got a pen, and you're kind of just giving your last piece of wisdom, advice, guidance to the world, whatever it might be. What are you writing on that piece of paper for the world to know about whatever it is you want them to know? If this was just the one thing you can give to the world.
That's a good question. I would say the power of the mind is everything. And by that, I mean, you can choose every day whether you're going to focus on, the things that are hitting you bad or the things that are bad in the world or the things that you're struggling with, or you can focus on every little victory. For me, during cancer, I could have focused on every symptom that I was feeling and how bad I was feeling. But instead I was focusing on, I'm going to walk a little bit longer today and like focus on that victory or focus on how blessed I was to have some, a friend come and clean my house. And when you focus on good, you'd be surprised how much you can accomplish and how much you can overcome. The power of the mind really is everything.
Huge. Okay, I lied. I actually have one more question for you. So a question that I always ask everyone. This is the last question officially. What is one thing, you've been diagnosed with cancer to be cancer free. You a chief petty officer in the Navy, law firm, calling the shots, business manager. all of these things, God has blessed you. There's fruit in your life. In this moment that we are in, last question I have, what is one thing that you are most grateful for?
I'm honestly most grateful for my relationship with God. Coming from spending 28 years without him and to now have finally like found him, I can't imagine life without him again. Like that's my everything. It's crazy to say because I look back a lot and I'm like, wow, life was so different without him. But yeah, he's just completely changed my life around, and I'm so grateful for it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. Well, that's all I have. Again, this is Josh Grady, Agent Talk Podcast. Kayla, is there anything else that you have, or are you good to go?
I think I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I appreciate you being here. Anybody listening, we appreciate y'all tuning in. Joshua Grady, Kayla Rogers here, and we are out.